Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely delighted to have Dan Black be our guest on the episode today. And Dan, first up, of course, I want to thank you for joining the show. But, I also want to acknowledge that you are, I think, one of the most iconic, highly respected thought leaders in this space. And it's a real privilege to have you on the show and to get a chance to talk with you.
Well, thank you for having me. I wish I had that kind of intro into every conversation I had during the day, but no, it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to talk with such a longtime friend and colleague. So appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So, one of the things we the listeners of our show will share with us often the kinds of things that they're interested in, right? What are the kinds of questions that are front of mind? Because it's a broad audience of people with different kinds of backgrounds and interests in this space. But, with everything that's going on with, global and financial challenges, an election cycle that's coming shortly, all of those kinds of issues that are floating around and in the air. I'm wondering from where you sit, from the people that you talk to, from what you see, what are the kinds of things we should be sensitive to in the coming, 12 to 24 months as you think about recruiting, talent, and even talent development?
So there's a few things. We're in such an interesting time, Manny. I think, we've been through some interesting times. It's gotten to a point where so many people have forgotten what normal feels like, right? Between the pandemic, like actual war on a very significant scale, climate change, regardless of your position on it, there's so many things happening that I think what I'm starting to see, certainly at EY, but also more broadly in the business community as it relates to talent, is much shorter cycles of adjusting to and trying to plan and strategize for talent. I think long gone are the days where you could say, well, here's what we need to do. Here's the pivot we need to make, whether you're a large organization or small, regarding things like talent attraction or retention or sourcing and benefits and those kinds of things. And even if gone are the days where you could have a kind of a 2 or 3 year strategy or a window with milestones. Now it seems like every quarter, just about, there's a let's see where we are. Let's course correct in real time because there's just that much going on. You mentioned the economy. That's the global economy. Perfect example. I've been hearing this for a long time. There's a softness, of course, but it's mixed signals, right? You'll see inflation will come down, but then unemployment will go up, and then it will come back down, and then we'll see change in consumer goods prices, right, in the opposite direction. So I'm definitely finding that a more sustained interest in more regular conversations around talent, certainly at my organization, but also beyond. And I think, by the way, Manny, I think that's a good thing, right? And so to your average student, job seeker, kind of member of the talent community at large, to know that potential employers and companies are thinking about what's happening in more real time. Because that's one of the biggest laments we all get is we're looking for jobs or out there in the talent marketplaces. Gosh, I just applied. I haven't heard anything, or they're waiting to see if positions will come out. That's a once a year type of thing. Happily, I think this means we'll see a much more regular kind of a turnover and refresh, if you will, at the corporate, the employer level.
Yeah, I think that's so important, not only for organizations, obviously, but if you think about job seekers, right? That
Right.
kind of a little bit more stability, that little bit more confidence in thinking about these opportunities are actually available.
Right.
We still have the challenge of super early recruiting. We used to talk about early recruiting. Now it's like super early recruiting.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of get
Yeah.
a sense, and I wonder if you're seeing that as well. Companies are kind of like positioning themselves. I kind of get the sense of like, gee, if there's a recession, if there's a downturn in our sector, we're going to maybe slow down our hiring right now, kind of take a step back, think about our investments, think about aligning our resources so that we could be more nimble and flexible perhaps than we have been in the past. Does that resonate with you?
100%, 100%. And I think the smarter companies, the smarter organizations are saying, hey, maybe we don't have, the number of open positions or the breadth of positions that we had 2 years ago or 3 years ago during, the Great Resignation. But we still want to be in the talent market, talking to people on a regular basis. Maybe I don't have something today, especially like you mentioned for this early recruiting and the sourcing, early identification. That's still a very big deal, but it is much more of a, let's have the conversation now so that if and as, or probably when, things start to turn around either for our sector or we get a better look around the corner of what's actually happening with, whether it's recession or softening or whatever term people want to use. We already know each other. You're already aware of what might be a cool opportunity. You already have some sense for where you might fit into an organization. So it's really interesting that yes, I've definitely seen a kind of a slowing down and kind of a pulling back a little bit, but not when it comes to identifying and building preference for companies. The best companies are still finding a way to do that.
Right. And I think that's a smart strategy, right? Having that brand positioning, having that engagement. I think you're absolutely right. Those companies that are being thoughtful about that are certainly going to have a step ahead of the others when it comes to, trying to fill those positions. I'm also, it's also fascinating, not just in terms of these environmental factors, right? Global economy, the impact of wars, as you've noted, all of these things. There's also the increasing role of technology in how that's kind of shaping the entire recruiting process. So I wonder if you could speak to that for a bit as well, because I think that's the job seeker of today definitely needs to be comfortable, with technology to be successful in their job search.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Look, I think there's two big components to this conversation. First is, this conversation around technology, particularly in the talent process and in the recruiting or talent acquisition process, it's not new. I mean, I'm going back 7, 8, 9 years when people are saying, hey, we're going to get into social media. We're going to start using video interview, which, by the way, was a big plus when it came to the pandemic, and we all had to be on video for things like screening interviews and the like. So there was all kinds of new tech, mobile apply. That was all the rage 6 or 7 years ago. And at the time, people were like, no, what about my hard copy piece of paper, my resume? Can I hand that to you? I will say, and any technologist will tell you, the rate of change, of course, accelerates, right? And it continues to do so. So generative AI is pretty much on everyone's lips. Every meeting I go into talking about that. I think there's the other piece of that. So it's not new, but the other piece is getting comfortable with when and where and how and to what extent that technology enters into, frankly, a space that has two major players that don't always have the same, kind of end game in mind, that being the employer and the job seeker, and understanding your role in that and being comfortable with that is really important. So as an employer, of course, anything that I can do to help take some of the blocking and tackling and some of the more mundane parts of the process, to have those either automated or done, self-service by a candidate, great, because that allows my recruiting team to spend more of the time doing what they do best, interacting with people face to face, which will never go away. So I think that is, as far as I'm concerned, that's always going to be part of the process. But then on the candidate side, and this is a little less so maybe for emerging talent, Manny, but certainly more so for people that have been around the block a few times in job search or talent, getting comfortable with those parts that are going to be either automated or handled by an AI assistant, et cetera. Getting there quickly is only going to get you to a place where you're going to get that face-to-face that you really want quicker. So let me give you a practical example. Scheduling interviews. I look at how I even schedule my own doctor's appointments. Online, pull up a calendar, do it self-serve, self-select. I still know people no, I want to talk to a person. I'm like, ooh, but try to talk to a person to schedule with another live person or multiple live persons. That's only going to lengthen the time between when you're going to actually be in with that person in person, right? So I think it is certainly a two-way street, when it comes to tech and being comfortable with those changes. I also liken it to every time you get a new phone, right? Whether you're a new iPhone or a new if you're on the Droid platform, some new feature. I remember with iPhone, they took the home button off. People lost their minds, right? They're like, wait, this is new. I'm so used to X. Now, of course, you're like, well, it's bigger screen, bigger surface area. I'm so glad. I don't know why I had an issue with it. I think that the job seekers and employers alike have to figure out and get comfortable with getting those things in process, because what it will lead to ultimately is more time, more face-to-face time for candidates that are a good fit for the process. It's just getting to that point, requires a little leap of faith.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful insight. That difference, let's say, for folks on the career services side who are working with early careers folks versus alumni and the more experienced job seeker who, generationally or prior experience-wise hasn't really had to do those sorts of things. And, the kinds of tools that are available today are so significantly different, right? I think, too, there's a parallel on the career services side. People are really struggling with how do we want to incorporate, embrace, if you will, tools like ChatGPT and other AI tools. I think we're talking a lot about this, at Harvard from a, career services standpoint. And, we're settling on the let's embrace it. If you can use ChatGPT to develop your resume and then come in and see us, we're both of us, from an advising standpoint and from the candidate standpoint, talking at a higher level, right? We could spend more time finessing those nuances that might be specific to a particular employer or set of circumstances. So the kind of knowledge and wisdom that we have can be layered on, but almost further downstream, right, than that initial conversation. So I think it's a really interesting time. And, I wonder from your perspective, Dan, for the candidate of today, right, we've talked about a lot of shifts and changes, right, environmental, technology-wise, how, on the topic of AI, how that's even going to change the nature of work, right? So
that's right.
When you think about candidates and what they need to be thinking about, focused on, prepare for, in today's, kind of job-seeking world, what are your perspectives on that? What do you see? How do you describe that successful candidate, from your perspective?
Yeah. There's a few things that are really starting to emerge as I look. Just to give you a sense of volume, where I'm at EY, we'll get 5 million applicants this year. 5 million applicants. We'll hire some 150,000 people. So this is not anecdotally the ones and twos. There's a few things that I see across the board, regardless of job, sector, service line that we're hiring for. A few things that are rising to the top for those candidates that are the most sought after. And I in my view, and my views don't necessarily reflect the views of the organization, but they do kinda, is the number one is that that growth mindset, that willingness to try and learn and reinvent yourself is the fastball. That is something that, with the acceleration of technology, with the rapid change in what the company needs, what the market needs, what the world needs, coming in and having the wherewithal to learn something new, to reshift skills. Depending on who you read, Manny, or who you listen to, people tell you, hey, what you've learned in your last job, your last degree, what have you, is going to be good for 2 to 3 years, and then it's going to be time to, reinvigorate or change. And that I'm seeing that in spades, right? Candidly, with candidates that come in. We're hiring for some skills and competencies, and I'm happy to touch on some of those ones that we're looking for in bigger numbers. But the ability then to then flex and change and shift into something else. Think about it this way. If I just take the two of us as an example, Manny, what I studied in school, and after that, what I did in my first 3 years, and then my next 5 years in my organization, I don't do any of that today. I don't need any of that knowledge, candidly. I'm an accountant, by training. And while certainly, of course, being good with numbers at a professional services firm is not a bad thing. I had to learn how to manage different people, and then I had to get come up to speed on employment law when I first started in recruiting. So that ability to make those adjustments, because I know there's gloom and doom around, the robots are taking our jobs. That's a little bit, I disagree. I think the robots or the AI will be taking some tasks, which what that means is if there's a task or something specific you're good at that's going to be done, either automated or outsourced or what have you, then that means, hey, I need to be open to learning other things where I can add value. And so that's, I think, number one, being that growth mindset. It's not what I can do today defines me. It's what I can do today is what I can do today. But that doesn't mean I can't do different things tomorrow. And I'm happy and eager to learn. I think just to round out two other things, since we've already been talking about it, a comfort level or a significant amount of comfort with the digitization, the automation that is happening around us. There are, as you are probably full aware, there are naysayers. Like, I don't believe in any of this AI. I'm like, well, you don't have to believe it. It's here, right? But getting comfortable with the role that it's going to play and knowing that it is going to continue to play a role in business like it does in life, that's important. So I call that, or sometimes we refer to that as a technology or a digital mindset. And that doesn't mean, digital by default, but it does mean for automation and technology and the like, being comfortable that that's going to be, going to be with us and it's going to contribute to success in business. And then last but not least, and I know this is a term that lots of people talk about, but that global mindset, which includes things like inclusiveness and belonging and those kinds of things, there is no shortage of studies that will tell you that if the people that are actively seeking out contrary and different opinions and backgrounds from their own, those teams that are comprised of that variety of background of thought and background, consistently outperform any other homogenous team. So we're actively seeking people that have that. Hey, I want to meet and work with and be surrounded by people that are different from me, defined any way you like. And so finding candidates and finding new talent that have that, not just like, hey, I'm okay in a new and different environment, but that's actually, I'm actively seeking it out. I say that would round out my top three on what we're looking for in candidates.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I think when you think about those things, they suggest that someone can not only be successful in the near term, but will always be successful, right? That growth mindset, that sensitivity, Luddites need not apply, so to speak.
Right.
But even that, that mindset of being flexible and being nimble. Because organizations, the world is increasingly flexible and nimble. So if you can adapt to that, right, and learn and grow and adjust, I think your long-term success is that much more secure. And as a matter of fact, I have to say,
let me have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was going to add one thing because, and you and I have had this conversation a lot around, okay, what are the hard skills people look for? And then we always talked about the soft skills, like, communication skills. I know that one always rose to the top. I have to say the new soft skill, which is anything but soft these days, is emotional intelligence. If you can bring to the table, I don't care if you're a first or second year associate or a senior VP, the ability to read and understand what's happening around you, whether that's your coworkers, your subordinates, your direct report-ins, boy, you're going to be, it's a huge event because there's just so much at play. There's so much that people are dealing with. The ability to understand that, empathize with is just absolutely priceless these days.
Yeah. Amazing. And, I think for anyone who's listening to this episode and who is, talking to career coaches and others in this space, I think those are the kinds of things that, we're talking about, right? How to, I like to think about it like the art and science of the search, right? Just like the art and science of how you prepare yourself, there are certain fundamental things that are specific to the role, but that art, that emotional intelligence, that, ability to persevere, for example, that's part of that art of that, successful individual. And I remember something always resonated with me, Dan, and I always want to give you credit for this. We were talking once, and I said, well, so Dan, what kind of people are you looking for? And your response was along these lines. Well, Manny, let me tell you, everybody is looking for the same thing, and that's a GSP. And I was like, GSP, what is that, Dan? And you said, good, smart people. And, really what you described, right, characterizes good, smart people. I also think that fits in with a trend that we're definitely seeing now, and I wonder if you could speak to this a little bit in the sense that you mentioned it, and that's kind of the increased emphasis on skills-based assessment, skills-based hiring. So if you were explaining that to a candidate today, how might you, characterize that in such a way that they would say, like, wait a second, what is that? What does that mean? And what does that mean for me?
Yeah. And it's something that certainly we're talking about. That, I mean, it is, everyone is talking about this. And so to me, what that means is you, the individual, the job seeker, are so much more than just the amalgam of the degree, the certification that you achieved, the past years of experience that you've had, if any internships, et cetera. You're so much more than that. And we're looking to get down to the next level, or double click 2 levels below to say, what is it that you were able to accomplish in any of those, whether it's a higher ed environment or a work environment, et cetera. And what are those things about you, again, those skills or competencies that helped you to accomplish those things successfully, or at a rate that's faster or better than maybe the next person sitting next to you interviewing for the job. And when it comes right down to it, getting at that micro level, well, first of all, Manny, it is complicated to take a human and understand what are those those individual points. It's much easier to say, oh, well, that's an engineering major. She or he knows engineering, and that says something about the individual and what they know and what they bring to the table. Whereas this is a whole laundry list of things: hard skills, soft skills, things learned by doing, things learned by observing. And so trying to pinpoint those skills and competencies without having to rely on, in essence, what the old resume or has in front of you, and instead, this is how I equate it. Don't look at the resume at the bold sections. What are the bullet points telling me, right? So to bring it right down to a gradual level. So I'll say, okay, this person says that they have 4 years working in professional services and consulting, but the second bullet. So they were able to sell, a new project to a client that they had an existing relationship with within their first year on the engagement. Now I'm thinking, okay, yes, consultants, but I'm like, oh, this person knows how to leverage relationships and understand the needs of someone else, such that they could then sell them business, particularly in a time like this where it's tougher to sell new business. So that's what we're really getting at, and most organizations. And a lot of the technology that these organizations use is looking at, okay, what is the skills ontology? What are the kinds of building blocks that we're looking for? How do we put specifics to these skills that people bring to the table? And then, and this is the tricky piece, how do you interview someone or assess someone to truly understand whether that's a skill or competency that they fully possess, that they are on the way to possessing, or that they're it's kind of nascent in where they are in their career journey. I think the first organizations that can get to figure that out are going to have a huge advantage. So that's what we're working on now, is what is that list of skills, the most valuable of which will be useful across our organization, and then how do you best assess for whether someone has those, is developing those, et cetera, or will be able to bring them to bear on the organization. So that's skill and competency, recruiting, and the focus on that. And you can understand why it's much more valuable to see a whole slew of things that a person could bring to the organization, as opposed to, I am an engineer, or I'm a 10-year consultant, or what have you, which seems to limit what that person might be able to do in 3 or 5 or 10 years.
Right. I love I love everything that you've said, and a couple of things really kind of jump out at me. One is this notion that, even though we talk increasingly to students about the need to be able to be conversant with, understand their accomplishments, their skills and competencies, have a language, if you will, and be able to blend that to the story. I think the point that you made, which is like, you can't take a person and deconstruct them simply as a list of skills and competencies, right? And you had said like double clicking, but you also said kind of in a way, but you also have to be able to zoom out. So I love that kind of concept. Like, you zoom in on things, but you also have to zoom out. So it's not an either or. It's you have both of those kind of angles and take to really understand what someone is able to bring to the table. And I think that's terribly important for candidates today, because I think it's a little bit daunting to think about, like, oh my God, how can I analyze everything that I've done and anticipate, what's going to be relevant in an interview or to a particular organization? But that kind of zooming in and out concept is I think, it's healthy for people to keep in mind, right?
Agreed.
And I think that space obviously is going to kind of continue to develop. But That's, I think, kind of logically leads us to another kind of obviously timely and recent development in the space you and I occupy, and that is the way that the country is thinking about or rethinking affirmative action.
Yeah.
We saw that obviously with the Supreme Court decision, which focused on affirmative action in college admissions. But increasingly, we're starting to see these rippling out sorts of things, right? Well,
Right.
wait a minute. If affirmative action doesn't make sense in college admissions,
Yeah.
where else doesn't it make sense? Or might it
Yeah.
be interpreted as unconstitutional? And
Yeah.
and really kind of this has had an interesting and I think chilling effect for a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering from your vantage point, with your recruiting colleagues that you talk to, or from an EY standpoint, what do you see? What is that kind of like pulse beat? What are
Yeah.
employers really thinking about now in light of these most recent events?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a great. I'm so glad you asked and brought it up because clearly, so many organizations, certainly EY included, as I mentioned earlier, are actively seeking to bring the widest possible group of skills and backgrounds to bear on whatever your customer or client base on, and you can only do that when you're sourcing and recruiting and attracting and retaining a wide variety of people, and so clearly access to some of the best the best talent out there. We've relied, many companies, and certainly why, relied very heavily on other people, other parts of the talent ecosystem to provide us with some of that, lots and lots of options, right? Lots of diversity, right? Lots of backgrounds. And so certainly with the recent case and when we talk about admissions, colleges and universities is a big part of any large employer, frankly, most employers' sourcing strategy. So now it's a matter of saying, what does this mean? What else will we need to be able to do to continue to get, have access to and provide opportunities to that wide swath of talent wherever it may be? And frankly, the bottom line is we're going to need to do more. We're going to need to. We were just talking about recruiting for competencies. We're going to need to get more granular in our efforts. I will tell you, we at EY we've been looking at this for a long time. Right? We've been saying, how do we make sure that people that are deserving of an opportunity, right? People that have the smarts and the interests, et cetera, to work at a place like EY, how do we make sure they have the access to the firm that is not reliant on just what particular institution they have to be, or what part of the world they live in, or what technology they have access to? And so we have greatly expanded how we go out and find talent. And I think it's gonna mean we're gonna need to continue to do more and more of that. The other interesting conversation that's starting to emerge on the employment side is, and particularly for larger employers, we are all beholden to equal employment opportunity laws. Like, let's not have guidelines, laws, and regulations. So the best way that to put it, in my opinion, is when we look at adverse impact. That's the standard that I am held to as EY, as a recruiter, that says, hey, we want to make sure that your recruitment process is not in some way or shape or form disadvantaging a particular part of the population, right? So, and the adverse impact, and I think a lot of people, I talk about this when I induct new recruiters to EY, or when I talk as part of some of the associations I work with, which is, what that means is, let's forget all the other variables. If 50% of the talent market for what you're looking for, let's say engineers, if 50% of all engineers were women, wouldn't that be great? First of all, if 50% were women, and your company is consistently hiring only 10% of your hiring class of engineers as women, that would suggest that maybe there's some part of your process, your technology, your assessment that is, you're missing the boat. There's something that might be providing a disadvantage to that specific part of the population. And the fact of the matter is that the EEOC holds large organizations to that for things like gender, race, ethnicity, sexual preference, et cetera. So now, as an employer, and this is just a little bit different from what the standards that higher ed is being held to. We need to how to figure out these two things. We need to find the proportionate part of that talent marketplace to attract. Make sure that our processes are not doing anything to detract. And at the same time, with this case, and this heightened awareness of what we're trying to do to make sure there is that equitable access to opportunity, those two seem to be in dissonance with each other, and so it's just going to make it a bit harder then to make sure that we're finding the very best talent, attracting them, and then ensuring that our process is not in some way disadvantaging them. And a good way of always doing that was, hey, well, people coming through schools, there's a process there to help to make sure that they're providing equal access to education to all different groups. If that starts to erode, then that makes it all the more complicated on the employer end. So there is a downstream effect on this that I think will reverberate for many years to come.
Yeah, I think that it's very affirming, I think, to hear you speak on this point, Dan, because I have a positive view on this. I think that the Supreme Court decision aside, the kind of pressure I know our colleagues both on the higher ed and on the hiring side feel in certain states in this country where the pressures and expectations are different. Those things aside, I have great faith that as higher education institutions, as hiring organizations, we're just going to simply find new ways that are consistent with legal interpretation to continue to commit to something that we all know makes a huge difference, not just at the organizational level, but very simply at the individual person level. Creating opportunities, maximizing opportunities is, I think, really what we're all in the business of trying to do, right? So I have great faith, and I tend to have a really positive, perspective on this. And I know you share that. So as we go forward, I think, advocating and being creative and innovative in this space is, I think, going to serve us all well.
That's right. I agree. Well said.
One question we've been asking is a more personal one, actually. And that is, based on your own experiences, right, as a not only hire of talent, but as a job seeker, what's that one piece of advice that you got that you wish you knew and that you would like to share with someone now?
Yeah. Well, as you might imagine, I got a lot of advice over the years. I've made a lot of changes in my career. But probably the best piece of advice was, I attribute a little bit to my dad, who is a big, important mentor of mine, but also a little bit to my wife, because she was involved later on as well. And that is, focus is good. So setting goals is good. Having career aspirations is good. Dress for that next job, meet that next person, networking, etc. However, and this is the big however, don't be so focused. Don't have that career map so in place or so, written in pen, if you will, that you're missing kind of peripheral opportunities that are just whizzing by. And so I thought that, because I always, I came from fairly modest background, so I didn't have a lot of margin for error when it came to, investment. Like I put myself through college and all these things. I'm like, I gotta have a goal. I gotta have something I keep moving toward. Because, I kind of felt like I have one shot at this. But at the same time, being open to other things, being aware, having my ear to the ground. And it played out this way. I was an auditor. I was doing consulting at EY. I got my CPA done. It's great, feeling good about it. And then all of a sudden, there was an opportunity to work in human resources, to work in recruiting. And my wife said, hey, I know that wasn't in the plan, but when else are you going to have this great opportunity to do something that you're completely not qualified for? I said, I don't know if I would have said it that way, but she was right. And I listened and I said, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot and see if I like it. And that was, 24 years ago. I've now got a quarter century in the recruitment and TA space in my career. And I'm so happier for it because I didn't just stick to that one straight line that I had mapped out, early in my career.
Amazing. And it kind of resonates with what you had said earlier about just being flexible, having a growth mindset, being flexible, right? Embracing new opportunities that are presented.
That's right.
So thanks for that amazing piece of advice. I know candidates all over will appreciate having that, in their back pocket as they think about their careers.
Sure.
Dan, this has been such a privilege to spend time with you, as always. Your insights are incredibly important, insightful, and I think exactly what our listening audience wants to hear. So I want to thank you for being a guest today. Hope that you will come back again on the show, and maybe we can explore some different topics.
Oh, I would absolutely love it. Anytime that I can be helpful, you just give me a call. I'll be there.
All right. Thanks so much, Dan. Take care now.
Thanks, Danny.
Say goodbye to our listening audience. Take
Bye,
care,
everyone.
See you on the next episode of the Career 411 podcast. Thanks so much.